The first shots of the American Revolution were fired on the morning of April 19th at Lexington Green. For some, the battles at Lexington and Concord meant the end of any hopes of reconciliation between the British government and the colonists. In a petition sent to King George III earlier that year, the First Continental Congress asked the king to respect the colonists' rights to life, liberty, and property. But the British government did not reply to the petition. In reaction to the British government's lack of response to the colonists' petitions, colonial leaders met again in May 1775. This Second Continental Congress was far from united on what course of action to take. Most colonists still hoped for a peaceful end to the quarrel with Britain. Most only wanted the king to respect their right to free trade. Both patriots, people who supported independence, and loyalists, people who opposed independence, were in a minority at the start of 1776. Most colonists were in the middle, with no strong feelings about the dispute with Britain. Even within the Continental Congress, support for independence was limited to about one-third of the delegates. Patriots such as John Adams of Massachusetts found it hard to win others to the cause of independence. Many people feared the consequences of separating from the mother country. Although the Congress did not openly revolt, delegates showed their growing dissatisfaction with the king. The delegates authorized the Massachusetts militia, already fighting the British Army, to become the Continental Army. This force would soon include soldiers from all colonies and would carry out the fight against Britain. Congress named a Virginian, George Washington, to command the army. As Washington prepared for war, the Congress pursued peace. Some delegates, like loyalist John Dickinson of Pennsylvania, hoped for a peaceful solution to the disagreements over trade and taxes. On July 5th, the delegates signed another petition to the British government, Dickinson's Olive Branch Petition, as a final attempt to restore harmony. After hearing of the colonists' preparations for war, King George refused to read it. Instead, he looked for new ways to punish the colonies for revolting against the tax policy. All the while, battles between the British and the colonists erupted around Boston for the balance of 1775. Continued hostilities with the British Army led to increasing support for the independence movement. In January 1776, a 50-page pamphlet titled Common Sense further increased support for the independence movement. The author, Thomas Paine, called King George III a royal brute and a tyrant. Paine ridiculed the very idea of rule by kings. Americans, he said, would be far better off if they governed themselves. Some 500,000 copies of the pamphlet were sold between January and July of 1776. George Washington wrote, "Common sense is working a powerful change in the minds of men." As spring of 1776 wore on, delegates to the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia took up the question of American independence. Their disagreements and debates were long and furious, but Paine's pamphlet was doing its work, increasing support for independence in many parts of the colonies. The tipping point came in May 1776, when Virginia authorized its delegates to support independence. Soon after, Virginia delegate Richard Henry Lee introduced a resolution to Congress that proclaimed, "These united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states." Before voting on Lee's resolution, Congress appointed a committee to draw up a statement arguing the reasons for separation from Britain. Congress knew that not only fellow colonists would need to be convinced, but they also hoped that France or Spain would help them in their fight against Britain. Thomas Jefferson, a 33-year-old delegate from Virginia, was given the task of composing the declaration. In the heat of the Philadelphia summer, Jefferson struggled to find the words that would convince Americans and the world of the rightness of independence. The Second Continental Congress finally voted on the issue of independence on July 2, 1776. The vote for independence had to be unanimous, but this was only achieved after delegates from Massachusetts and Virginia worked throughout the night trying to convince the delegates that independence was the right decision, and only after Caesar Rodney made an 80-mile ride from Delaware to cast his deciding vote. By the time Congress had voted, Thomas Jefferson had finished the Declaration of Independence. On July 3rd, the Secretary of the Second Continental Congress read the document aloud. The delegates debated Jefferson's words, made a few changes, including taking out any reference to slavery, and then voted to adopt the Declaration. On July 4, 1776, John Hancock, President of the Congress, signed the Declaration. Over the next month, the rest of the 56 delegates signed in secret. In British eyes, the colonists were now traitors. For France and Spain, the Revolutionary War would present an opportunity to get back at the British. For the colonists desiring independence, there would still be a long road ahead before winning freedom from the British government.